Scott Porter, all the way from Tennessee.
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
So anyway, me and Scott kind of talked a little bit beforehand, but I told him I like to do things a little bit different around here. So we're going to take this time to get to know the man himself. So tell us about you.
Oh gosh, man, about me. Well, I am I'm just an old Southern boy. You know, people all the time are like, you know, you're on TV or you're this or you're that. And I'm like, man, I'm plain as dirt. I get up in the morning, put my pants on just like you, one leg at a time. If not, I'd fall on the floor and hit my face. But you know, I have a passion for the unknown. I have a passion for history. I love to investigate, and you know, there's so many layers. You know, I love helping people understand things they don't understand, help them to have some type of security with what they got going on. I also love to help people be healthy and stay alive longer, so I'm not investigating them so soon.
Right. I hear that. Man, I could tell you some stories.
Oh, yes. We've got stories to tell. So I'm going to try to share this out here real quick for you, too.
Sure, no problem, man. Go for it.
Okay.
Take your time. We got all night. Well, at least another 45 minutes anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good.
So you were born and raised right there in around Gatlinburg, right?
No, actually around Gallatin.
Gallatin. I'm sorry. My bad.
No, you're fine. That's over in East Tennessee. I like it over there too. It's beautiful. But yeah, right here, just outside of Nashville. Been here most of my life. I have lived in Richmond, Virginia, and Bowling Green, Kentucky, and over in the Knoxville area for a while. So I've had a few places I've set down, and but right here in Middle Tennessee is where the roots are.
Okay, so are you a Titans fan?
You got to support the home team. You know, I think you have to. You just got to do it. I've never been a huge NFL football fan. I was more of a college football fan because, you know, just to me, it always felt like those guys had all the heart, you know. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not playing for the almighty dollar. They're just playing because they love the game. They're trying to get somewhere and make something out of themselves, and they just love the game. When you get into the NFL part, it's like, you know, it's kind of tainted with contracts and so on and so forth. But, you know, it is what it is.
I hear you. So Volunteers fan then?
I was always a Vols fan. Sure was.
I hear you. Well, you know, I honestly can say that I wasn't a big Volunteers fan until Peyton Manning was there. So.
Oh, yeah.
I really rooted for them that year. They won the national championship. So.
You know, I mean, everybody's got their opinions, and that's fine. The guy could play ball, though. You know, I mean, the guy could play ball. I have to give him that. So.
Oh yeah. So anyway, I was telling you earlier that my wife and I made a trip out to Tennessee, and so we went into Nashville, and there's a restaurant that you can go on the roof. And you can eat up there, but you can also see right directly into the stadium.
Right. So, I'm trying to think of what that is down there. Let's see. I'm not sure which one that is right there where you can see off into it. I worked downtown Nashville for a while for a law firm down there after I got out of college when I got one of my degrees. And we were up in the first Tennessee building, and there was a balcony up there, and you could literally see over into where the stadium was, and that was pretty cool.
Man, that was so awesome. That was like the thrill of a lifetime.
Oh, it is. It's amazing. It's like, it was funny for me too, because I remember the first time that I went to work down there when I landed the job, and I remember going up the elevator and getting up there in the offices, and I was like, man, you know, I never imagined me, just this, you know, old country boy from up here in the sticks, would have been working somewhere like this. And of course, then, you know, years later, you end up on TV and you're like, well, I'd never imagined that old country boy like me ended up on TV or anything like that.
Yeah, I'll have to say the Tennessee Ernie Tubbs, the Ernie Tubbs record store, that was awesome. And of course, we didn't get to go in, but we got to go by the Johnny Cash Museum.
Okay.
And
did you do Tootsies?
I don't think we did Tootsies.
Okay, you've got Tootsie's down there. Of course, then you got the Grand Ole Opry at the Ryman Auditorium downtown.
I did do that. I had to go to that.
Yeah. See, that's on my bucket list to investigate. I have
Really?
never been. Of course, I've been down there many times backstage and everywhere else. Got a lot of friends that play there, but I've never had the opportunity to investigate it, but I would love to. I mean, there's just such a rich history there. I mean, gosh, I can only imagine what would happen.
Well, dude, I grew up watching Hee Haw, and
Oh
so
yeah.
you had Minnie Pearl and Grandpa Jones and all them
Mm-hmm.
guys, and that was just something I always had to do. And when we got to go, that was the thrill. I mean, even though the original is on one side and then you've got the new one on the other side.
Right.
Oh my God, that was awesome.
Funny story, because my family's been involved in music. My grandfather was asked to play on the Opry back years and years and years ago. And he turned it down and told the person who was trying to persuade him to play on the Opry to talk to his brother, because his brother could probably do it. And so my great uncle ended up playing with the Possum Hunters, I think, for about 25 years down there. And my grandfather finally got to play on the actual Grand Ole Opry show for his 94th or 95th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And actually played the show. And it was pretty fun, because we got down there, and the song that he played was called "The Scruggs Reel." It's an old bluegrass song. And I never knew it until that night, but he wrote that song when he was 14 years old, and everybody plays it.
Oh, wow.
So,
and I just realized I called him Ernie Tubbs, or it was Earl
it's
Scruggs.
Ernest.
Tubbs. It was the Earl. Is it the Ernest Tubbs record store?
It's Ernest Tubbs record store, and then Earl Scruggs was a banjo player.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no relation, or if it is, it's distant relation. I've heard a couple different stories. You can't ever tell. All these trees intertwined down here.
I'm not going there. All right. So you said you went to college. Where did you go to college?
Oh gosh, I went to Western Kentucky University up in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Wow.
Spent some time over in Knoxville. Went to Volunteer State Community College as well, and went to UOP and Trevecca University. So I actually have 3 degrees. So when I started college, I thought I wanted to be a physician. And then I thought, I don't want to spend 10 years in school. But then as I started going to school, different opportunities came up, different things came and happened to my scholastic career, my educational career. And so I ended up with an associate's degree in law and a paralegal certificate, and then ended up with a bachelor's degree in business management and HR, and with a master's degree in healthcare administration.
Wow. Are you still in healthcare?
I'm not right now. No. I'm just in health and nutritional products. I'm a distributor for It Works, and we sell health, nutrition, and beauty products.
Oh, okay. Well, I could use some beauty products, that's for sure.
We'll talk after the show. I've got some stuff that'll knock your socks off.
Well, the reason why I asked you that is because I was telling you my wife's aunt lives up there, and she's in she does the computer stuff for the healthcare system.
Okay.
So I just thought that would be a weird coincidence, but
You could never tell, because the jobs that I had before, I was working with the state of Tennessee with the Medicaid program, and then transitioned over to one of the contractors and worked my way from being their training supervisor up to I was the executive director of the program here in Tennessee for a while before I got into TV. We were actually implementing the Affordable Care Act here at that time, and doing some other eligibility system changes and build outs. And the opportunity to be on TV came along at just the right time, and the stress level was high enough that I was like, you know what, we'll step away for a while. It was a good move.
Yeah. So what in the world got you involved with, getting into ghost hunting, and then you get on television? Because let's face it, there's tons of groups out there. What would you say set you apart from everybody else?
That's a great question. I have no clue, because when I look out there, I think, okay, why did they decide to choose us? You know, why did they look at us and say, hey, you guys have got a chemistry that'll work on TV? And you know, at that time, it was a camaraderie and a joint passion to discover the paranormal. And you know, for me personally, my experience was that I'd always had a curiosity. You know, being here in the South, when someone passes away, you have the wakes, and then you have the funeral, you have the graveside service, and then everybody gathers back at home, and you all sit around, and of course, back when I was little, it was everybody sit around, drink coffee, and smoke cigarettes, and talk about, you know, old times, good stories, bad stories, funny stories. And then the later it got in the evening, as everybody's talking, you know, you'd have just a certain few that hang around even longer. It always ended up the conversation of ghosts and spirits and things of that nature. And people would tell ghost stories. And I always wondered, why don't I have a ghost story? You've all got a ghost story. I don't have a ghost story. I've never seen a ghost. I've never had anything weird happen. I want it to happen, but I've never had it happen. And so it was always a curiosity even from a small child, because you know, everybody watched these horror films or ghost movies, and of course my mother would always say, you can't watch that because you have bad dreams, but I still had a curiosity. And then on up through college, I was actually in college going to Western Kentucky, and I think this is before I changed my degree. I think I was studying at that point in time industrial engineering. And I came home. The way I had my classes set up is I didn't have class on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So I came home on Friday, and I may have came home on Thursday, but anyway, it was Saturday morning. I got up, and when I woke up, I could smell breakfast throughout the house. Now, their house has nothing associated with it that you would call a history or story of paranormal. They built it themselves, had it built in 90, 93, 94. So we're the only ones that ever lived there. And so I got up, smelled breakfast. I'm like, great, this is awesome. Be a good home cooked meal, because I'm tired of eating out and pizzas and ramen noodles and all that kind of thing. So as I walk down the hallway, I can hear the skillet sizzling. I can hear the fan blow, the exhaust fan turning. I can smell the breakfast smells. I look into the kitchen, and as I'm looking in there, I see my mom standing there in a pink house coat. I can hear the spatula hitting the skillet and cooking breakfast. So it's a ranch house. So I turned and went to the restroom, freshened up, you know, splashed some water on my face, use the bathroom, wash your hands. But I wasn't in there more than a minute or so, and came back out, and the smell was completely gone. So no smell, there's no sound, but it was like, okay, what happened? Where did that go? I know that breakfast is in here because I just smelled it and heard it. And it wasn't uncommon for them to have to pack up really quick and leave. Being very active in the church, having a farm, you know, is either somebody called and they had to go to the hospital or go visit with somebody, or something happened at the farm and they'd have to go to the farm. So I went to the staircase that goes to the basement, yelled for them. They didn't answer. I looked in the garage. The car was gone. I was like, okay, well, they're not at the farm. They've gone somewhere else. So I looked everywhere that I thought they would leave me a plate of food. Like normally if they had to go somewhere, they'd leave me a plate of food if they knew I was there, either in the microwave or in the oven. So I looked, it wasn't there. And so I called my dad's phone. I said, hey, where's breakfast? He said, what are you talking about? I said, breakfast. Mom was just in here cooking breakfast. I was going to eat breakfast. He's like, no, we're not there. I said, I know you're not here. I was going to eat breakfast. You always leave me a plate. No, we're not there. We haven't been there. So I hear this scuffle in the background. My mom gets on the phone because my dad, he's kind of hard of hearing. So she's not thinking that he's hearing me correctly. And I get on the phone with her and I said, where's breakfast? And she said, there's no breakfast. We're not there. I'm like, yeah, you were just here. You're cooking breakfast. And she's like, no, we're not there. We've been going all morning. We're shopping. I'm like, what do you mean you're shopping? You were just here cooking breakfast. She's like, no. She goes, we're in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I said, no, you were just here wearing a pink house coat cooking breakfast. I saw you. She goes, no, we've been shopping. We've been gone since early this morning. If someone is in that house cooking breakfast in a pink house coat, you need to get outside right now and call the police because it's not me.
Wow.
I said, okay. So I hung the phone up. I sat there and scratched my head for a minute. At that time I had hair, so I scratched my head. And I thought about it for a minute, and I was like, what did I just witness? What did I just experience? Because it was one of the most phenomenal experiences that I'd ever encountered, where I could not tell you that it didn't happen, because I could smell it. I could hear it. I could see it. The only thing that I didn't do was put the food in my mouth and taste it. I mean, it involved those senses, those three senses. So probably one of the most vivid experiences I've ever had. Now, years later, of course, my mother, then she would get me to tell that story to family when we would go places. Well, tell them about your ghost story. Tell them about what you saw. Tell them about what happened. And it was kind of funny because, I was always hesitant to tell people that because I thought they would think I was crazy, but she would push me and say, tell them about that. And then it was years later when my grandmother passed away, and we were around, and my mom had me tell that story. And as I was telling the story, I was talking about the pink house coat, and I said the pink house coat was almost like it was quilted, like it was fluffy quilted material. And I remember seeing my mom's face kind of just flush. And I was like, what's wrong? And she goes, I just remembered something. I'm like, what? She goes, my grandmother used to quilt. So she was a quilter all the time, made quilts. There was hundreds of quilts that she's made, if not thousands. And my mom said, I just remembered that your grandmother gave me a quilted pink house coat when your father and I got married, and I have no clue where that thing's at.
Oh my gosh.
So that added another layer of curiosity to the story, because everyone that was associated with that particular article of clothing was in the living world at the time that this experience happened. So I don't believe it was that of that nature, but what was it that I saw? And I've had many conversations about it since with other minds in the paranormal. And I often wonder if maybe if I didn't just catch a glimpse into a parallel universe or another time or something of that nature, and just kind of put it all together. But yeah, it was a very interesting experience. And that right there fueled me to want to understand and learn more. Why did this happen? Why do some people have a little bit of an experience and others have a major experience? Why do some people catch a glimpse of something and then it's gone? But yet I stood here and watched this thing stand at the stove cooking long enough to be able to gather the details of hair, articles of clothing, the movements of the body. I couldn't see the feet, so I don't know if they had on house shoes or not, but just being able to pick up those details, even the spatula, I could hear the spatula hitting the skillet or a fork or whatever it was, a metal utensil.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very curious that interaction occurred. So that kind of spawned my desire to learn more.
It's amazing that you talk about the parallel universe, because I've had similar type experiences where I've kind of thought, is there another universe that, another dimension there that, there's another layer that some of us are able to see and some of us aren't. So that's actually a pretty good question. Now I do have to know, because, I know a lot of people that, very church going, very steeped in their Bible, and they're very anti ghost hunting. So how does your family, I mean, how did they differ as far as that goes? They just support what you do or your curiosity, or how's that go?
They support me. I think one of the things we have to think about is society, and have to think about how society has evolved throughout the years and throughout time. If there was something that we did not understand or we could not explain through the utilization of our current book of knowledge, we would deem that thing to be supernatural or otherworldly. And if it didn't tie back into our biblical studies, it was deemed to be demonic by default. Just like if I came to you, say 300 years ago, 200 years ago, and I had a Bic lighter and you had your pipe and you wanted to smoke it, and I come up to you with my Bic lighter and struck it and tried to light your pipe, you would think that I was a witch or some kind of sorcerer because I held fire in my hand, because that was not something that they were aware of, that long ago. I'm not exactly, I'd have to look and see when the actual first lighter was invented, but nevertheless, you understand the concept. So we have to take into account that through our advancements of our book of knowledge of science, mathematics, physics, chemistry, and the sort, that we've been able to explain certain things that we did not understand before. Even through my genealogical research, I have read stories that my family has recorded when they were moving to the central Tennessee area. And there was a gentleman who was down praying because they were coming across the mountain and there was all these balls of fire that were flying through the sky. And they were praying because they thought it was the end of times. So the Bible teaches us that when the Lord comes back, that hell, fire, and brimstone will rain from the sky. And so what they knew about the world was just their book of knowledge. And when they saw these balls of fire falling from the sky of all colors, exploding into the earth and into the earth's atmosphere, they thought it was the end of time. So they're praying and they talk about this. And so then when I go back now at this point in time and I start to study and I look at this, their book of knowledge was so small and so confined, they weren't aware that what they were actually experiencing was the earth passing through the tail of Halley's Comet. Okay. So what we have to be open to, and I'm sorry, this is a long answer for a very, very pointed question, but what we have to be open to, and what I tell people is that I have my faith. My faith is personal, and that's my personal relationship with God. And that's something that's very personal to me, and it's between me and him. Now, on the other side, so I have my faith, and then on the other side, I have to have my science and my openness to learn and to grow my book of knowledge, so that I cannot let the two hinder one another. Right. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that people do is you can be a faithful person. You can be a person of faith, and you can have faith in that higher power. You can have faith in God, and you can have your belief as long, and then on this side, you can have your science and you can try to learn more. I think that that's what we need to do. We need to learn more about our world. We need to be open to learning about our world. And just because we think we know what we're talking about, we have to be open to understanding from a different angle, because how many times throughout history has medicine, for example, has a physician or has a scientist said this medication will cure you, and they take it only to find out later that it caused something else or it actually hurt them. I mean, for crying out loud, there was a point in time I think we gave people mercury and other types of stuff to see what happened to them. So as we've grown and evolved and we've added to our book of knowledge, we have come into a understanding, the enlightened period, as it continues to evolve. And so I think that's what we have to do. And for me, it's that separation. So I have my faith, and I can talk to you about my faith and talk to you about my beliefs there. But then there's also the science side of it, and that book of knowledge that's constantly growing.
Well, yeah, I mean, he wouldn't have given us that knowledge to look into science if there wasn't some. And you have to have some faith. Don't get me wrong.
You have to have faith. I have told people before. I hear people a lot of times saying, "Well, I've heard people talk about not going to physicians or not using medicine because they rely on their faith to heal them." And I'm like, who do you think gave them that knowledge to be able to treat you and help you? And I saw a surgeon the other day. He said, we go in and we do the mechanics of it, and the good Lord does the healing. It's a great explanation.
I like that answer.
It's a good one. I'll take it, So.
I totally get that. There's so many things that God has given us that we should take the time to, of course, you want to know how it works, but and you use those things, but you have faith that they are going to work. So yeah, I get exactly where he's talking.
Yeah. I mean, that's just it. You have faith, and I'm not one that looks at people and says, your thought process is wrong. I look at people and say, you have your thought process, you have your reasons behind it, and I understand that. Um, there's other ways of thinking as well, and there's other information out there that you should get to know. Just like in science, you may have done an experiment here, and you had an outcome, and there may be something that you just don't know, that somebody else may have done the same experiment with a different set of parameters that got a different outcome. And if the two don't share their knowledge, then they're going to be at odds saying, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. And then you don't exchange the knowledge. And so there's no growth as a society.
It's funny you bring that up, because I was thinking earlier about how you have people that are very big believers in the paranormal,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have those that are skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've always said I like the skeptics because they make our job, number one, that much harder,
Mm-hmm.
but it also means the proof means that much more.
It really does. I mean, I tell everyone, anytime someone asks me, I want to be a paranormal investigator, what's the first thing that I should do? And I tell them, be a skeptic. Question everything. Don't take it for face value. If it happens, study it. And don't study it from one angle and think you have solved the problem. I always go back to an investigation I did years ago where this woman said her husband was visiting her throughout the wintertime. So he would come through and he would walk through the house during the winter. But during the summertime, she said he wouldn't come to visit. She said, I think it's because he loved to fish and he was going fishing all the time. But in the wintertime, he was always home. So I think that's what it is. And she said he would walk through the living room and into the kitchen. She said, I think he was fixing his evening meal and just replaying those steps, but he's always there. And so then you set the cameras up. You go in and you do the investigation. I'm sitting there and I'm looking. I'm not getting anything, except all of a sudden, here goes this apparition walking through the living room toward the kitchen at about approximately the time that she said. So when you review the material, sure enough, there it is. There's the apparition. I mean, you can see it. Looks just like a humanoid figure. But something was off. There was lots of light that kind of danced around the room, and it was unique and weird, and I couldn't figure out what it was coming from. Kept looking at video footage from different angles, trying to see if there was something that would stand out to me. And so one thing that I did notice in one video clip was that the neighbor across the street would drive in. The house was over here, so he would drive in and then would back into his driveway, and his driveway kind of turned down like this. So he'd back in the driveway and turn in and back in, and his lights would hit the front of the house. Well, she had this big bay window there. And then right in that bay window, she had this huge antique curio cabinet. I mean, this thing was probably 1800s or later or older. But it had this really thick beveled glass on it. And she had it full of these leaded glass figurines. And so the only thing that I could determine was that at the angle that this guy's headlights were coming across this curio and catching the beveled glass edge, it was focusing the light on one of those figurines and was casting it out into the living room, and it would pass through the living room as the light went across the beveled edge. So, boom, there's an explanation. I figured out what was doing it. That's awesome. So I go in and I move this figurine. I just slide it over, and I say, your ghost is gone. That was it. That was your ghost. But what really brought it home to me was that the tears in her eyes, because up until that point, she thought her husband was still there with her. And that's what made it so real for me, that what we do and what we live for as paranormal investigators is that interaction. To us, it's a phenomenal experience, but to others, it's a heartfelt, deep connection to someone that they loved in life and have lost. So we have to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, well, I guess that has to be disheartening when you think, oh, my loved one's visiting me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to bring up a question, because this was brought up to me today,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about, are our loved ones always with us?
You know, I hear so many different things that are said, and it all depends on your belief. Now, if you are of the faith order of Christianity, then the soul leaves the body and goes wherever it's going. Um, from my standpoint and my thought process, and like I said, I've had many conversations about it. My faith tells me the soul goes wherever it's going. But the energy that's within us, the energy that is of this world and of this body, it's organized and it's contained within a biological home. So it's here, it's controlled. That energy interacts through cells, it interacts through neurons, and it interacts through passing across dendrites and all these different structures that are inside our biological body. And once that biological body breaks down, that energy has to release and go somewhere.
Exactly.
So is that energy released back into this world? And does it commingle with other energies? Does it continue to keep some type of form and interact as we, and have some type of higher cognitive thinking or cognitive thought process to be able to interact with us on a energetic level? So those are questions. I think the deeper you get into the paranormal or the supernatural, because paranormal is just the normal, just not yet understood. But the deeper you get into the supernatural, the more questions arise. It's like that rabbit hole. And if you're really trying to study it, then you won't be blinded by the emotional conjecture that follows with it. So, do they stay with us? I think a portion or piece of them do. I think a portion or piece of everyone who's ever existed stays here. I don't believe that the soul stays here.
Now, biblically speaking,
Mm-hmm.
we go back to the story of David,
mm-hmm.
and he went to the soothsayer. I forgot exactly how the story goes, but he called upon one of the kings,
mm-hmm.
and he came back in the form of a ghost to
mm-hmm.
talk to him.
Right.
Okay, so if you believe in the Bible, you have to believe in that part of it, right?
Right, but in that case, it wasn't a ghost. It was a demonic entity there for deception. He was looking for insight for personal gain.
Right.
I don't think that what we are doing, if you're in it for the right reasons, you're not doing it for personal gain. Just like for me, ending up on TV and it becoming a job or whatever the case may be, that was not my end game. That my research and study was to learn more, just to be able to share that and to hopefully be able to understand something to a level that I can explain it to someone else. But I think for him, it was more for conquest and ultimate personal gain. And so in him trying to summons that information, I think he went about it the wrong way.
This is true. You know what? I didn't think of it from that angle, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And that's a lot of times, that's what people do, is we get so caught up in the story for face value, and we don't dig into it. I mean, I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. We're human beings. We can look at a video and we can say, oh, that's so bad. This happened. This is wrong. This should be dealt with. But what you don't know is that perhaps maybe part of that video is missing, or maybe there's a different angle that shows a completely different story. But because we are human and we operate on emotion, we get so bent out of shape because the emotion that is caused by that view that we saw, we don't take time to understand that there's another view and to extrapolate the facts of what we're seeing. And just like in that case, people will say, oh, well, just because Jesus came back and told everybody, look at me, you can touch me, I am not a ghost. He's by saying that ghosts exist. Well, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Maybe he's just saying that at this point in time, you believe that ghosts exist because I should not be here right now, but I am not a ghost. So, it's all in how you look and extrapolate the data.
Well, and you also bring up a good point, because when people, like you say, they look at a video and they see it for what they saw, and they tell everybody this is what is in the video, and then everybody just automatically assumes this is the truth because the first person said this. And I can tell you from my own experience, I've been out on investigations where other investigators have been out, and they hear the voice, and they hear things going across the floor and these kind of things. And then and don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying I'm any better than anybody else, but
Right.
I mean, we've come in with a different way of looking at it, because I like to come in as a skeptic and try to find what is the most reasonable reason why this is happening. And that voice that people keep hearing, well, if you take the time and you say, oh, this happens around 2:00 in the morning, well, there was also a bar just a block down the road. So that's when the bar lets out and people are loud and obnoxious and you hear voices.
Yes.
This particular place, there was a fax machine upstairs, and it would reset itself at a certain time every night. And what you thought sounded like chairs rolling across the floor was the roller on the fax machine. So.
And that's it. It's so funny to go back, and I love this one too, because people, what we do is we take our recorders and we set them up, and I'm guilty of it as well. We set the recorder up and we start recording, and if you're not accustomed to notifying the recorder of any and all noises that you make. Now, here's the thing that you have to keep in mind. These recorders are a whole lot more sensitive than our ears are. They're going to pick up a lot of other information out there that we may not cognitively pick up. Or we may be walking along and we may kick a coin. We may bump a table, and we don't think about it making a noise that a recorder is going to pick up, so we don't tag it. We tag if we do something that's phenomenal, or if we, run over a chair or something, or we may not even do that. We may be so frustrated because we hit it in the middle of the dark, we don't tag it. And then you go back to review your evidence, because there's a lot of people who are paranormal investigators that record this data and they don't review it for weeks or months at a time, and they have all this time that elapses. I'm going to tell you right now, if I had a 5-minute recording and tried to write down every single thing that happened during that 5-minute recording, and I came back to it a week or two later and tried to listen to it, heck, if I came back to it the next day and listened to it, I'm going to hear things that I did that I'm not going to remember doing. And I'm going to think, okay, now that was something, I need to go back and listen to that. So that's one of the things that you have to be careful about too. Just like with that fax machine, good gracious, I've heard wind coming through windows and doors, and it sounds like somebody is whistling a tune, all because wind changes. And if you've got an aperture, and the wind hits it one way, it's going to make one tone. If it hits another way, it's going to make a different tone. And so as that wind fluctuates, it's going to sound like music, or it's going to sound like a whistling, of a person walking in a hallway. So you have to always keep those things in mind and question all of it.
Yep. One thing that happened that evening, we kept hearing this noise coming in one of the rooms, and I finally decided, you know what, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to sit in the dark and I'm going to see what happens. So I got the recorder sitting there. I got K2 meter, all this stuff set up. And, when you're sitting there and you don't really have a whole lot to do, sometimes you notice things that you don't always notice when you're walking around. And I figured out what the noise was. Every time the air conditioning cut on in and out, the false ceiling would go up and down.
Oh, yeah. Pressure changes.
Exactly. So yeah, you never know.
You never know. I sat one night at a location, and I watched the door open and close the entire night, and I was like, what is causing this? Never could figure it out. And finally, in the light of day, I looked, and the air return happened to be in that room around a corner, and so it was changing the pressure gradient in and out of that room, and so that door would. So it had a propensity to be closed or near closed, and when that AC would kick on or that return would open, the air flow through would pull the door open, and then when it would shut, then it would eventually, the weight of the door would pull it back around. And if you take that out of that context, you look at it and you're like, something's walking through that door. Now, let's look at the other side of it. I've been at locations before and heard the doorknob turn and then the door open. Okay, now I can't explain that one.
This is true.
I can't explain that one. I don't know what that one is. But, you know, and those are those supernatural occurrences or interactions that I love to experience.
Oh yeah, those things that you just absolutely just shaking your head, scratching your head. I have no idea. Those are the moments I live for.
Oh, I'm gonna tell you, I think one of the craziest, without getting into my deep story about Hawaii, that's the craziest story ever. But Steph and I were at the Dunlora Inn up in Virginia one night, and we had an event, and it had been a good event. We'd had a good time, had some interaction. It's always a great place. And we were sitting there on a Sunday with the owner, Sheena, and we were talking to her at the foot of the stairs, getting ready to leave. And we were just sitting there interacting because we're very close. And all of a sudden we could hear a man and a woman arguing, and it sounded like they were inside the house. And so we sat there and listened. It got louder. The argument got more intense. And so I went through the house to look and see if there was a TV on or a radio on or anything of that nature, because we didn't know if we had the doors locked. Maybe somebody had slipped back in. What was going on? So I walked through the entire house. Everything was off. No one was there. We got back down the foot of the stairs. We're sitting there. I turned my recorder on my phone because it was the only one I had with me. Set it on the banister of the stairwell. And we continued to have our conversation, but listening, and we could hear this arguing. And as it got more and more intense, another male voice came in and kind of hushed them down. But right as this male voice, right before it came in, there was this sound that sounded like, and the only way I can describe it is like a laser gun noise. And this male voice came in, overbearing, really strong, and kind of quieting them down, and it quit. And that noise, or maybe it was the noise was right after him. But I'm like, I know I got that. I know I recorded that. And so I played the audio back. You could hear all of us talking. Didn't catch the voices arguing, didn't catch the male voice, didn't catch the laser sound. None of that was captured on audio, but we all heard it. And we were like, I don't know what we just experienced, but I have no explanation for it, because nobody else outside was talking or arguing, and we got out of the house. We're like, I don't know what that was, but I don't know if it was something sliding through the matrix and made that sound or what it was, but I've never experienced that one before. But it was an interesting event, and those are the types of things that I love to check out and get deep into.
And I know y'all use the spirit box. I'm kind of like on the fence about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I will have to say, when y'all are in Hawaii and that voice comes over and says your last name, and you're like, hey, what else do I go by? And it says Scott. I'm like, okay, I don't know how to explain that one.
The only one that I use that I have any faith in is EchoBox. That's the app that you use on your phone. Now, the reason that I have faith in it is because when you pull apart the programming, mm-hmm. It is a true randomization of phonetic sounds. So it's not full words. Each byte or each sound byte is a phonetic sound. And so as this thing scans through these phonetic sounds, the energy or how it interacts decides what sounds it will play. It was funny because I was talking to the creator of the app, Danny, before one of our live shows. And I said, I just need to know how this thing works. Is there a GPS in it? Is there anything in there that does it? He said, no, it's just a simple piece of code that randomly plays whatever file shows up. It just randomizes. And that's how it puts those, just randomizes those sounds. So it's not looking for a location. It's not looking at anything else except for just randomly playing those files. And I said, okay. I said, so what's the magic? How does it actually work? And he said, he said, I have no clue. I was like, you know what? That is the most real answer that a fella could give you, or anybody can give you, if they've developed or built a product and they've got it out there and it works, and you've experienced it working, and for them to tell you, I have no clue how it works, you can't get any better than that. I mean, for me, that's just like, that's as honest as the day is long. And that's why I support that out. And not only that, but the evidence, I mean, I've taken this thing on investigations and had it speak Portuguese. I've taken it to Hawaii and it's spoken Hawaiian. I was there with a kahuna, and he told me, he said, that's Hawaiian, but it's the ancient language. It's the language that's no longer spoken.
Wow.
I can't explain that. That I cannot explain.
Okay, I'm gonna have to try that out.
So yeah, so that's the one that I like. The others, you know, I always question them. I mean, we use a lot of that stuff. You know, we do use a lot of electronics on the show, and I think that I have seen situations where energy will interact with one and not the other, and it makes you wonder, why did it choose that device when this device is the exact same device? Why do the two devices pick up energy different at that moment when I can take them and go over here to a piece of a constant test subject, and I can have both of those go off in the same way, but then in this supernatural environment that it's in, one goes off and one doesn't. You switch the two and you get the same result. So it's like, why does that happen? I can't explain that. You know, it's an anomaly. But to get some of the intelligent interaction that we've gotten with the EchoVox, that one I will always, until I find a reason not to support it, I will support it.
I got you. Man, believe it or not, our time has just flown by.
It has, hasn't it?
It really has. And I'm, you know, just out of courtesy, I just want to tell everybody good night and end the show right there. And I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and especially to Mr. Porter here, taking time out of your day. You know, that's very gracious. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me out here.
Po boy.